Hello, welcome to another episode of Impossible Equals I'm Possible, a live show that I co created to really have the difficult conversations and have talk about the challenges and issues that a lot of people are facing that prevent them from chasing their potential instead of accepting their reality. And one of the things that I found that's really fascinating about the conversation is this idea on clarity, right? And I was in the process of getting more guests, and then it's honestly been a crazy week for me in terms of the course and really how that's developed into a bunch of different things that I will talk earlier on the video, later in the video. Oh, hey, Crystal, good to see you. And I just wanted to come on here, and we had an incredible conversation with Dr. Leslie Flowers yesterday on clarity and how powerful that conversation was. So I just wanted to start it again. And these conversations, when you go into audio rooms, are loaded questions. I believe that's Damien. Good to see you, Damien. I think that's you. Please let me know if that's you. And it was a powerful conversation, and I didn't actually get to share how I found clarity recently. And I had this like post that was supposed to come out yesterday. LinkedIn's been a little funny, as I know it's been for a lot of people. Larry, good to see you. Good to see you, Larry. You were at the audio event yesterday, and who's here? Damien, good to see you. Who's here? Crystal, good to see you. Okay. And yeah, it's been an incredible conversation in terms of clarity and how important that's been, especially for people who are entrepreneurs, but also just really getting clear on what do you want out of life in general, right? And I shared at the event how I've kind of been on this journey where I had supreme clarity right since I was 10 years old, wanted to be a neurosurgeon. So I went to college when I was 16, all these things. And then a year later, it was like everything changed. And I've slowly been on that journey of finding clarity. And one of my best friends, Lindsay Elizabeth, I've shared her with you all before. And if you haven't, you definitely have to go connect with her. She talks about how clarity changes, right? It's like as you evolve, as you learn new things, as you get new goals, the direction and the things that you used to want to do aren't no longer the case. And that's kind of what's happened for me really, right? In terms of a little over a year ago, I had no idea what LinkedIn was. And over a little over a year, I've managed to create a network with people all around the world, a lot of thought leaders, a lot of top voices before they started giving it away as through these collaborative articles. And it was really just filled with powerful people who were doing incredible things. And I realized then how powerful LinkedIn really was. And I noticed that in a lot of my professional circles, people weren't on LinkedIn, right? And I just got a lot of clarity. And when I got to see how powerful the storytelling aspect has been and how so many people have been able to impact, oh, we got lots of people tuning in. Deidre, good to see you. I'll pull you up. Deidre, good to see you. Lee's here. He's going to be on the show sometime. We had an incredible story. The Batman himself, Brian Showman, good to see you, my friend. You'll be on the show too sometime. And we got Jackie here. Good to see you, my good friend. Who else is here? Tanya's here. So good to see you, Tanya. Yes. Oh, wow. Lots of people are here. Danita, so good to see you. Danita, I can't believe I don't think we're connected because I couldn't invite you. You'll have to send me a connection request. Joshua, good to see you, my friend. And Amber's here. Good to see you. Okay, I think we're caught up. And I just want to give a brief sum up of the event, and then we'll get into what I was talking about today. But a big portion of our conversation yesterday in the audio event was about Deion Sanders and how he's been able to transform and do so many incredible things, right? And if you don't know who he is, he's an NFL legend, two-time Super Bowl champion, one of the greatest athletes ever. He is head coach at Colorado University, and they've basically been the talk of college football. And he caught my attention because one of my mentors is Grant Cardone. And if you don't know who Grant Cardone is, I don't know how, because this dude's omnipresent, right? He's on every platform. You see him like all the time. And I started seeing that with Deion Sanders. It was like when I would go to TikTok, I would see Deion Sanders. When I go to Facebook, I would see something about Colorado. When I would go to YouTube and all these other things, he was everywhere. Coach Prime, yeah, Damien, you're right. People probably know him as Coach Prime. That's his like name, Prime Time, whatever it is. And it's been fascinating because he talked about this idea that your clarity is going to offend people. And the long story short is that he had a video that went viral when he just kind of announced basically that he was going to Colorado. And he was very clear before like he and his staff like even got there. It was just him and I think a few of his people that came. And he was telling all the kids there what he was going to do, what he wanted. Basically, he was so clear on his vision. And I read an article that said that Colorado paid him $29.5 million dollars, and they didn't actually have that money. And I mean, I don't even know how much money they've made since he's come over. I mean, they've sold out all their tickets. They've gone from winning one game the entire season to they're 3 for 3 in the top 25. I mean, this is a powerful story of how incredible clarity can be. And where I wanted to take it is that there's so many people on LinkedIn, right, who are coaches, who are selling products, right? And the if you know anything about me, I like to live a lot of the things that I talk about. And when Dr. Leslie and I were going to do this conversation on clarity, I didn't really have a lot of professional clarity, if I'm being honest. Like when I created my course on LinkedIn Success, that was my first time creating a course, right? I had to regain clarity on the way that I got paid because I spent most of my professional career in finance, and the way that things were set up for what I was doing prior as a financial strategist, I was able to give. Oh yeah, Damien, he did. Yeah, he made 1.2 million on his sunglasses. Yeah, that's true. And I basically had to kind of retool everything because the way that things were set up with my finance career is that I didn't actually take any money from my clients. So I could afford to give everything away. Like a lot of you probably know that I have, and I still give a ton of stuff away. But when I decided to switch over to doing this whole LinkedIn strategy thing full time and working with people, creating courses, speaking, all these types of things, I started with one product. I had a live and recorded group class. And I did probably about a couple of those. I started out at $250. It was a 4-week program. And then the second group was 500. And my mentor was telling me, like, this is too cheap. Like, giving people too much value. You need to charge more for it. And the reason why I didn't was because I was clear that this was going to be a long-term play. However, what nobody told me, and a lot of people don't tell you this, is that the hardest part about being an entrepreneur, whether when you're selling courses or anything that's not really like a tangible thing that's a physical, the hardest part is always getting clear on the value. Because let's face it, right? A lot of us will say that, oh, we're priceless and all these type of things. But if somebody pays you a certain amount of money, you're going to do something that you don't want to do. Let's be honest, right? Like if you really, really don't want to do something, they always say that everyone has their price, right? And that was something for me that was an interesting journey to kind of uncover. And what was fascinating is that over this month that I did these two group courses, I had people that asked me about, well, what if I just want to do it on my own? Right? What if I don't want to do like the group class? I just want to do independent study. Maybe they couldn't do it in 4 weeks because it was really concise because I cut out a lot of the fluff, right? I basically put everything that I learned about LinkedIn in 4 weeks. And it was like, I wanted something that people could take, but then also implement immediately to get their return on investment back. Nicole, so good to see you, my friend. Oh, isn't it nice to see you? And what was interesting for me is these were a lot of things that I didn't think about because I just had a live and a group record and a live and recorded group class. So what's really happened for me in terms of clarity professionally is that now I have an option to do recordings only, right? If people just want to do their own thing. And then I started getting people that were asking me, well, what if I want to work one on one? I did a poll on LinkedIn that asked, would you prefer to work in a group setting or one-on-one? And a lot of people for specialization and technical things said one-on-one. So I said, okay, now I have to create something for one-on-one. And then you got like all types of questions where people were like, well, what's your monthly rate? 3 months, 6 months, a year, all these type of things. So these were things that I had to figure out. And then after I figured all that out, I got somebody that reached out and said, well, what if I don't want to do anything like with the course, but I just need help on LinkedIn? Right? And then I had to figure out, okay, well, what is going to be my hourly rate to do like freelance and consulting work? And the reason why I thought that that was so important is these were things that nobody told me about, right? Like when people put out a course, when they do all these types of things, you kind of like go in with tunnel vision and then everything gets opened up. And that's really what's been fascinating for me is I've gotten to see how much this whole thing has evolved. And I want to talk about this next part, right? Being expert of your story. And everybody knows I don't like the term expert. I don't like the term guru. People used to refer to me as both all the time, and I did not like it. I do believe though, if somebody's going to do it, it should be someone else instead of yourself. And I was really thinking about this though, and as much as I don't like the word expert, everyone is an expert on their story, right? And I noticed this when I was speaking as well. I was watching a podcast with I love watching a lot of podcasts and I pay attention to how a lot of like great speakers speak. And I noticed that there's three things that people do when they speak, and even like some of the greatest speakers do this, and it loses a lot of credibility, right? And this has probably been something for me that I've worked on a lot, obviously, because I speak a lot. I have a lot of practice going live and making video content and all these type of things. So it's a lot more, I guess, easier for me to do it. And it's these three things that I hear people say a lot. I think a lot of likes, filler words, and the whole "I think" thing, this is probably one of the most powerful things that somebody told me when I started speaking, and they said that a lot of people are thinking, "What have you actually done, and what do you know?" And that really changed the way that I started speaking, right? And it's, "Oh, Donna, so good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while, Donna. So, so good to see you." See, this is fun. I don't even think I sent that much invites, and a lot of people are coming. I'm telling you, this is the fun part about LinkedIn. People just show up at these events. And that's what I found is that the language that we use is so impactful ba- in terms of the impact and the stories that we want to share, right? When I've been doing a lot of work with people on both my course and just like consulting and all these type of things, clarity on their story is a huge problem that a lot of people have, right? And it's for a multitude of reasons, whether people feel like their story isn't anything unique, whether they feel that their story isn't relatable. I know that was something that I still feel that way, honestly, just because of in terms of the context, it really is, right? But where I learned through this live show that we have so much more in common is based off of the emotions, right? We all can relate to being scared. We all can relate to being like so happy and having like an incredible thing, right? It's the emotions that we really kind of connect with. And that's really one of the things that I've been kind of trying to implement in people when we're having this discussion of, hey, like, how are you going to monetize your story? How are you going to share it? And it's really about coming from a place of experience. When you look at a lot of the people on LinkedIn who are successful, they're not really talking about a lot of theory things. They're sharing stories, they're sharing their experiences, sharing testimonials, because that's really what works. Damien says, I want to see this. Being confident is another thing many people lack. They wonder if anyone would take them seriously. Yeah, and Damien, it's really interesting, right? Because we had a really interesting, well, a lot of interesting conversations yesterday, but there were two that really stood out, and it was one of the first audio events that I attended yesterday. We're talking about boundaries, and somebody talked about being like selfish, right? How boundaries were kind of like a selfish thing. You do it for yourself, and I've always kind of looked at helping people in a way as like somewhat selfish, because while you're like doing it for the other person, it is you that kind of wants to do it, right? So I always kind of associated like a little bit of a selfish thing to it. Well, when I actually looked up the definition of the word selfish, it was completely opposite from what I thought it was. It I don't remember the exact definition, but it was something along the lines of like not concerning others, like for yourself. So I was introduced to this new word that I started using called self-fullness. And basically, what that is about is being aware of your own needs and requirements and meeting it while also being in service of others. So that's like one huge shift for me that I've made that's been powerful. And then the other conversation that we had was, oh, let's see. Mary has, oh, darn. I wonder who this LinkedIn user is that said being confident. I thought that was you, Damien. Oh, it's Samya. Oh, wait. Is it Samya? Darn, there's so many of you. It's hard to keep up. Damien, Mary. Okay, Mary, you have a great comment. Let's read this. Money was invented to trade, Paul. Your wrath of knowledge is a trading of skills. Your knowledge has a value, how you value it, how others value what they need and are willing to trade their money for. Your responsibility is to yourself and what you choose to trade. You have the knowledge to trade. It's a very fascinating part of humanity. We don't always have choices in the cost of life. Yeah. Oh, okay. It was you, Samya. Sorry. There's a lot of LinkedIn users here. So if I forget anyone or if I say the wrong person, I apologize. But yeah, it was a powerful aspect of, when you have clarity, you're going to offend people, right? I remember something that Deion Sanders said that really kind of made me think about something yesterday, right? And he said that when you are so right, people go out of their way to like find something wrong with you, right? If you don't know, they made this whole big deal about the other coach that said, "Oh, my mama taught me to uh, take off my hat and sunglasses when I communicated with adults," and it was this big thing. But anyway, yeah, and that's what I find is that there's really levels to expertise, right? I joined this new app called Owl, and I don't really know necessarily how it's going. I mean, I've sold like a couple courses through like conversations that I've had with people where it was like one lady, we had a conversation for, I want to say it was like 40 minutes. And this was back when I was still on, like, they have an intro 10 calls where you have to charge $1 for 10 minutes. So she paid me $4 for 40 minutes, and I gave her so much value that she said that it was worth millions, but she also like bought the course instantly. And I asked her one question that kind of changed everything, right? And I said that she was in the process of creating a course because I guess she was dealing with some personal issues. And I asked her the question of, did you create this course for X and basically the issues that she was having. And she said, "Oh, she said nobody's ever asked me that question." Right. And when I look at a lot of information, right? One of the things, and this for me has been probably one of the best things that's happened to me, but it's also been one of the most challenging things, is that when I started training with some of the most successful people in the world, it it changed my perspective on pretty much everything, because I realized that when you're around people who are shooting for like bigger and better things, you're on like kind of a different vibration where you're shooting. Oh, Nancy Deborah, so good to see you. Yes, Nancy Deborah is definitely going to be on the show as well. And I can't wait for a lot of the guests to come on. But the reason why I say that it was good and bad for me is it was good in the sense that it showed me really quick what quality is. And in terms of there's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of courses, there's a lot of just information, right? And it showed me really quick what was quality and what wasn't. And the other good thing that it did was it created an incredible network of people that I've been able to meet and connect with all over the world. And I get to essentially accelerate by learning from them and everything that they've been able to do and they've managed to achieve. And it's actually been a really powerful tool for me, because it's one of the biggest accelerators that I've had, right? I talk about my grandparents being an accelerator, mentorship, my aunt, my unicorn, that I get a lot of my emotional intelligence from. And it was really interesting because a lot of times, this is one of the things that I found, is that people tend to look at me like the typical 20, I'm what, 26. I had to think about that. I'm 26. Yeah. And it was interesting because I was having a conversation on the Owl app with this lady, and she was like two and a half times my age. And she's like, wow, she's like, you've taught me so much about emotional intelligence. Right. And it goes back to being clear on what we can control and what we can't, right? I was really thinking about this, and I said, looking back, I don't know why my age was my biggest insecurity, because it was never something that I could control. I can't control how old I am. I can't control, when I was born. I can't control who my parents are, but I'm able to control probably four of the most important things that we basically have control of, right? I'm able to control my work ethic. I'm able to control my attitude. I'm able to control my thoughts, and I'm able to control my actions. And that for me has been so powerful, because it's important to understand that what people think is their ceilings could be your floor. And that was a really powerful tool for me that I've had to lean into. And since I've really been clear on kind of where I'm going, and this idea of really controlling my energy probably more than I ever have, I've cut down my time on LinkedIn significantly. I used to go probably like 20 to 30 events a week, and now I go to maybe like 5 or 10, just because a lot of the conversations that other people were having weren't really conversations that I wanted, right? And I wanted to talk about this idea of clarity, because I think it's important for us to understand that, for me, one of the reasons why I found myself in that position in the first place was because I didn't have a lot of support in the toughest times of my life. So it's one of the reasons why I I tend to be there for other people, like when they need it. And the reason, Tamara, clarity and being expert of your story is huge. Yeah, definitely. Right. And the one of the things that I found that gave me a lot of clarity is when we lack something, we tend to overindulge into it. And what I mean by that is, because I didn't receive a lot of support when other people were like putting on events, or all these type of things, because time for me is the greatest gift, and support is something that was so important to me, I would give it to other people, and then I would sit in the event and I'd be like, yeah, I don't like I didn't like the direction that the conversation was going, whether it was too basic, whether it was too surface, whatever it was. It just wasn't aligning with my vibration and my energy. And that's why I talked about how when you have clarity, you're going to offend people. Not necessarily saying that you're better than somebody else. It's just that the direction and the vision that you have is different than what everyone else. Oh, tomorrow. No, it's been adversity for me has been the greatest gift. I've learned a lot from it. And I believe that your story will become someone else's survival guide. So definitely, I'm grateful for it. Definitely nothing to be sorry about. And going back to this idea of being expert of your story, right? I learned over the past couple weeks that pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice, right? And I did an event probably, I think it was last week, where it was this idea of what is the story that you're telling yourself, right? And the unique part about why I say the only thing that we really are an expert on is our story, because we're the only person that's with ourselves, 24/7, 365, right? Every second of the day, you are with yourself. If somebody tries to tell you that they are an expert on your story, then that that's obviously not going to work. And I feel there's a lot of power into that. MD says talk about the Fiverr algorithm. I have bored with Fiverr services. Yeah, I haven't used Fiverr in a while. I used it for my banner, but I haven't used it in a while. Yeah, pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. And I really do believe that the reason why a lot of people lack clarity is because it requires the hard conversations, right? And for me, that was probably one of the most freeing things is that I found when I got to social media, I didn't necessarily care about a lot of the noise that I experienced because I don't think anybody can tell me things that are more painful than the things that I've told myself, right? And that's why I say that pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice, right? If you look at it from the workout perspective, right? In order for your muscles to get bigger, they have to like break down. And if you've ever worked out and you haven't in a while, pain is inevitable, right? But it's because your muscles are breaking down to grow. And it's kind of the same thing, really, if you think about it. If you want to learn something new, if you want to invest, like there's financial pain, emotional pain, like all these different types of pain. But it's necessary in order to grow. And that is really what I found became such a powerful and freeing thing for me. And yeah, oh, I want to touch on what Amber said. Now that we can see you, Amber, we'll bring you up. Knowing what rooms you belong in, which you don't, is a gift. Don't apologize for knowing where you want to be. Yeah, and you know what's really interesting for me, right? I remember something that my mentor told me, and she said, "When you are unpredictable, you are gonna be feared." And that was kind of one of the things that I learned is that whenever I go to speak and I would get messages from people, like, they would just be so excited because they didn't really know what I was gonna say. And there's something about it for me. I just like so many things are so saturated. It's like people talk about the same thing about mindset. You hear about growth mindset and fixed mindset. You hear about just so many basic things. And I even noticed this, and I'm curious for anybody in the audience as well. One of the things that really has me curious is, and if I've ever introduced someone before, if you've ever heard me like speak or talk about somebody, I generally say things that you haven't like heard before, right? And there's something about that to me that I just love people who do things that are so different, right? And when you hear people like talking about people, it's just like the same thing, like, oh, this person's great. Or you're in a group of people and they're like, oh, these people are like legends, and it's just like for me, I really did lean into the community that I joined of being an outlier, right? Everything about the way that I do stuff is an outlier. The way that I talk about people, the perspectives that I take, the the pieces of content and the things that I do. And it really has for me become such a freeing thing is that I became very clear on who I was, and so many people, and this is something that really came I kind of came into over the past 2 weeks, is that we tend to negotiate pretty much everything in our life, right? We tend to negotiate how much money we make, we tend to negotiate how much time we spend on things, we tend to negotiate the people that we allow, don't allow. And the one thing that we shouldn't negotiate is who we are, right? Stop negotiating with who you are, for me, was probably one of the biggest takeaways that I had uh, this week. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And oh, we got some comments. I like reading the comments. You guys keep it coming. This is fun. What do we have here? Our clarity can be threatening to some because they don't want to do the work clarity requires. Yeah, this is a great point, Corinne, because you know when when I started training with my mentors, right? I was the youngest one in every professional community that I've been a part of, right? And people would always tell me things like, "Oh, you've accelerated so much, and oh, it must be nice," and all these type of things. And I would tell them, it's like you. People say that they want things, but I don't believe that if they knew the price that it took to pay it to earn to get to that point, they would do it because it requires sacrifice, right? And it's one of the biggest misconceptions that I see with so many people in entrepreneurship. It's like people want the entrepreneurial lifestyle, but they don't want to do the work. They don't realize that you essentially work for free as an entrepreneur until you start making money. And sometimes you have to work 100-hour weeks. Sometimes you have to work 80-hour weeks. There really is no balance in the beginning. And that's really one of the things that is so important to point out, is that people just need an accurate depiction of the things that they're actually getting into. I think suffering is more than a choice. Some people are in a lot of pain, for example, if someone is disabled or if someone had a bad accident. Tomorrow, I don't want to go into this too deep because I know that it's a personal and a challenging conversation. I can just tell you that I have met people from every walk of life, people who are amputees, people who have like every type of illness, and they have done things that would be the definition of this show: impossible equals impossible. I believe that when there's a will, there's a way. And if you want to see proof of that, go on YouTube and type in Zion Clark. He's somebody that I met this year. He's on America's Got Talent. He has no legs. And he talked about how you don't need legs to leave a footprint on the world. And it was probably one of the most powerful quotes that I heard. And I'm happy because we're both the same age. And, he'll definitely be on this show sometime soon as well. So that's what I'll say to that. And what we got here? Growing up in choices are difficult for children who are never valued. Yeah. Mary, I definitely don't discount that. Growing up in choices are difficult for children. Yeah, it definitely is. And, one of the things that I talked about with my story is there was a lot of challenges that I faced, right? My dad wasn't a part of my life. My grandparents, I always felt like people were leaving. And for the longest time, I I felt like I was living more for other people than I was kind of myself. And what I would say to that is deserve is a really I don't like the word, and the reason why I don't like the word deserve is because we come into the world with nothing, right? Like we come into the world with nothing. Most of us will leave with nothing. I like to say, besides like the lives of people that we've impacted, right? And in order to use the word deserve, right? Like people tell me all the time, like you deserve like all the success and all the things that you've done. And I just like, for me, I've earned it. I've had to work and do things that I've paid the price to get to kind of where I'm at, right? And that's really the question that a lot of people have to ask themselves is, are you exactly right? Like, are you willing to pay the price? And oh, what do we have here? I love this here, what Joshua said. A person's pain and fear will tell them how much they really want something. Oh yeah, Joshua, for sure. And it's funny when you're talking about fear, because for me, I would say there's really only two things that I'm really afraid of for me, and that's regret and not meeting my full potential. I remember this past February at the 10X Growth Con, the final speaker was Tom Brady, and like the whole crowd went like crazy. And he talked about how the greatest fear that he had was disappointing people. And I thought that that was like really powerful, right? Because so many times and for me, I've used it to drive myself to do things, right? Like I remember when I started training with my mentor, and she gets like hundreds of messages a day from people that tell her like they're gonna go to her retreats and do all these type of things. Well, I told her that I was gonna go, and when I ended up going, we had like a beautiful moment, and it was my favorite memory of 2022. And she said that, "Do you know how many people that tell me that they're gonna come to my retreats and never make it?" And she said, "You are one of the few." And Th I guess that goes back to clarity as well, right? Just knowing what you want and pursuing it relentlessly and unapologetically. Oh, I butchered that word again. And yeah, definitely, Samya, it's always impossible until someone does it. Oh, Damien, I got 'em mixed up. Yeah, for sure. And this is this is so true, right? Like impossible equals impossible. I was laughing because when I was on LinkedIn this morning, I came across like some lady and she said like impossible equals impossible. And I was gonna comment like, oh, that's a great phrase. And then my screen refreshed and I was like, darn. But it's interesting, I love that other people are adopting the mindset and mentality as well, because it's almost like if you look at this idea of imposter syndrome, right? And I don't like using the word whatsoever, and I've actually had conversations with the number one startup coach in the world, and I asked her to consider my point of view, and she actually ended up shifting it, right? And the reason why I don't like it is because if you actually go and look up the definition of the word imposter syndrome, it literally says that it's basically a fancy form of self-doubt, right? And when we break it down sooner, or break it down like more to a root level, a lot of people who are feeling that probably aren't in the best place mentally and emotionally. And when you ask people, would you rather say, hey, I have some self-doubt here, which we all do, let's face it, right? Like anybody who tells you that they haven't ever experienced self-doubt is absolutely lying. We've all done it at some point, especially if you've done something that you've never done before. Or would you rather call yourself an imposter? Right? And I don't think anybody will say that this idea of being an imposter is um, negative. What I would tell you is that in my experience, I would say that most times that I've heard the word used, it was valid, because people were teaching things that they didn't actually do, right? They were talking about things that they didn't really know about. And we really broke down the definition of imposter, and it's basically about kind of deceiving people, right? And it's like, how can you talk about something that you don't know about? How can you teach something that you haven't done? And this is why I talk all the time about, it's important to not only be mindful of the words, be clear, right? Clarity, be clear on the language and the words that we use, but also be clear on the truth. Because None of this stuff that I said is my opinion. You can go look up the definition of the word imposter syndrome if you want, and it'll tell you the exact same thing, right? You can go look up the definition of the word selffulness and selfish, and it's the same thing. Yet the challenge that life has for a lot of us is that everything really is relative, right? I hear people all the time that will, and for me, this is something that I've come to learn through experience, is that for me sometimes it's hard to accept referrals, because if somebody thinks that they're a good person based off of their values and where they're going, and you're kind of in a completely different position, then maybe that might not be the person that you need to align with. I get people that send me people all the time that are like, "Oh, this person's a legend," like all these type of things. I was just talking with some lady earlier today, and she was telling me about how, oh, this guy on LinkedIn, he's got like, I don't know, 40, 50,000 followers, and he was teaching her about LinkedIn and how to like grow and stuff. I go and look at her profile. She doesn't have a banner. She didn't know that you can put hashtags on creator mode. She didn't have an about section. It's like some of these things, like there really is levels to expertise, and this is something that I'm learning. Oh, I am learning this to the fullest extent, right? Like, and for me, this is why I don't like the term expert, right? Because it's like, well, how are you gonna measure the term expert, right? I've trained with billionaires, and none of them call themselves an expert. I've trained with people who actually can not only prove the lifestyle and a lot of things that they're saying on a financial and on a relationship level, yet they don't refer to themselves as that way, right? So it for me, it's always really interesting because of the network and the connections and the people that I've been able to build. I tend to go into things very hesitant because I'm like, when I see people do that, I was like, I don't know if that's an expert. I don't know if this is somebody that I want to align with. And a lot of people might be thinking, oh, well, I don't know if that's necessarily a good point of view. Well, I want to share with you that my mentor shared with me something that I thought was really powerful. And she said that we should question things more than we trust them, right? If I'm gonna ask you to hire me and I'm gonna charge you $10,000, wouldn't you want to know that I've actually done the type of work that that I'm trying to teach you, or that there's been maybe like other people who've kind of gone before you that have had success, right? Like these are the type of things I think that a lot of people don't really think about in terms of clarity, in terms of labeling themselves, all these type of things. I I've learned this, and it's actually kind of funny to me now that I train with a lot of these mentors, is that once you train with a lot of the greats, you learn that every masterclass workshop, every type of fancy word that people use to sell stuff is really just a fancy word for a Zoom meeting, right? Like that was one of the things that we were kind of talking about in one of my groups, and how it's important to be mindful of marketing, right? And I say this all the time, that marketing is really a fancy word for manipulation. For me, transparency is my new marketing, right? When I launched my course, I told people, I was very clear on the fact that I hadn't helped anybody else do it, but I just did it for myself. I had recommendations from my finance career. I had a bunch of high level connections and people that could associate that. And that's really one of the things that I found, really, is that I would much rather offend someone else than lie to myself, right? And I feel so many people do that, and it becomes really hard for me sometimes to see people that don't aren't honest with themselves, right? Or they know that they shouldn't be doing something and they do it anyway, right? I Dr. Leslie Flowers, one of my good friends, we co-host What Are You Thinking, and she's one of the most brilliant people that I've met on LinkedIn. She and I were going back and forth yesterday about how for up until yesterday, we would always get into it because she says that there's only one thing that you could control, is that it's your thoughts. And then I always told her from the very beginning that I believe that we can control our thoughts and our actions. And there's a quote from one of the 10 scrolls that I love doing, and it's scroll 6. I am master of my emotions, and it talks about weak is he who allows his thoughts to control his actions, and strong is he who allows his actions to control his thoughts. And while a lot of people will like to tell you that there's a lot of stuff out of your control, I believe that you have control over two of the most important things, and that's your thoughts and that's your actions. And it's interesting because I was reflecting, I want to give Facebook its flowers live, because outside of the Memories app, I don't really have much nice to say about Facebook. But I will say that every morning I'm grateful for that Memories app, because I get to see how much my life's changed over a year, over 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, right? And it's fascinating. I remember coming across something that I shared that and it was a quote from, I believe his name is George Shaw, and it talks about how life isn't finding yourself, or life isn't about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself, right? And when I look at how much my life's changed over the past 3 years, it really has been a creation, kind of starting over, right? And it yeah, it's been a really powerful tool. Tamara says, oh, we got some comments. Corinne says, alignment is crucial on many levels. Yeah, Corinne, absolutely. One of the mistakes that I made was I I realized that when I was launching my course, I just had the link to buy it as, my hyperlink when you go to my profile. And then I realized, like, oh shoot, it would probably be a good idea for me to maybe like filter more, like have a questionnaire, have questions for people to answer to see if it would even make sense, instead of having somebody pay for it and come to find out that they really weren't kind of ready for it. I don't know if weren't ready is the right word, but like it just wasn't a fit, right? Like it didn't align with what they wanted to do or whatever. And yeah, that's been one of the powerful things for me that I've gained in terms of clarity as well, is just getting back to having coffee chats with people, right? Like Lee was here earlier. We just had a coffee chat today. I had an incredible conversation with one of my people in my mentorship group who's in Alaska. And what's really interesting for me, and this is a question that I'm curious, right, for anybody in the audience, why do we tend to why do we tend to stop doing things that are working for us instead of doubling down, right? And what I mean by that is, one of the reasons why I've been able to build such an incredible network and curate it and just filter it to the point where it's a lot of people who are doing high value things and that are actually making a difference. And these are people that I engage with regularly, right? It's it's interesting that that was really one of the things that kind of separated me apart from a lot of people on LinkedIn. I can honestly say that out of 20, I want to say, like, out of all the connections I have, I've had coffee chats with probably like 30% of my network. You could pick a person and I could tell you what they did, something personal about them, because I had a conversation. And that really became one of the things that I became kind of known for on LinkedIn, was the fact that my network for me really became my algorithm, as the little tagline says, right? My network's my algorithm. And I want to read this comment. It's a long one, but let's see here. Honesty. People are drawn to honesty. If you say you are new to the job and are clear about what you're offering, your client is set up to be happy because you set clear expectations. Then, knowing you exceeded those expectations. Now you have a happy client who is also a champion for you. Yeah, and you know what's actually really interesting for me, Donna, is My greatest champions have been my mentors. These people who've made like nine, 10 figures, like done pretty much everything that you want to do in life. Those have been the people that have been some of my greatest champions, not a lot of the people on this platform. And I think one of the most powerful things that I learned from one of my mentors is that what you do on foot multiplies online. Right before I came to LinkedIn, I already had a incredible network. Maybe not as massive as it is now, but in terms of like quality, like that was still there. I had helped over 1,000 people before I came to LinkedIn, and a lot of these things that a lot of people didn't have when they start, I did. I just didn't know how to navigate the platform. So that was really a huge thing here. You put me. Oh, who is that? Supermom, you put me in touch with the most amazing person. Yeah, that's awesome. This is awesome. This is why I love. I don't know if maybe I'm just lucky. A lot of my connections call me the golden child of LinkedIn because I seem to, knock on wood, never have any issues. But I love seeing all the comments. This is actually before audio events were a thing. This is how I networked. Was I went to live events. I would engage in the comments with the host. I would engage with other people in the audience, and it became a powerful networking tool for me. And who's here? Amber, good to see you. Mary says, because we are uncomfortable with success, it's like getting comfortable in a new home or new car or new city. There will be an adjustment phase. This is actually really interesting, Mary, because I was having a conversation with one of my best friends, right? And we were talking about how I actually believe that people are more afraid of success than they are failure. Right. And if you go back to the quote from Marianne Williamson, it's a really long quote. I'm not going to read it, but the part that I like is our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. It's that we're powerful beyond measure. It's not our darkness that scares us. It's our light. And me and one of my best friends were going back and forth on this conversation. And I said, think about it. If somebody's afraid of failure, there's there's really, if you do nothing, like you're going to fail, right? As long as you just don't give up, you're not going to fail. So that's like a much easier thing to deal with, right? Than dealing with everything that comes with success. I'll tell you, last year, I had a lot of people that didn't understand why. I wouldn't necessarily say that I complained about traveling too much, but it definitely was something where I was like, man, this isn't what I thought it was up to be, because I was constantly traveling, like every month, doing all these type of things, getting adjusted to new time zones, going to all these events. Like it was just really draining. And that was something that was really weird for me because I didn't really travel much because I lived in Hawaii, so everywhere else was like always so far away, and it was usually like really expensive. So I didn't really travel much. So you would have think that I loved it, but it actually got to the point for me where it became really draining, and that was something that I had to really deal with. I mean, now you love traveling, right? Because it's like experience and all these type of things. But I would say for me, one of the reasons why success became a fear is that if a lot of people are being honest, right, we give ourselves a lot of excuses. We tell ourselves we don't have time. We tell ourselves, oh, we can't do this. The list goes on and on. I'm not going to go through the list, but when when you acknowledge your greatness, when you acknowledge your potential, it completely invalidates all those excuses and all those fears and things that we like to tell ourselves. I don't want to say fear because I don't really believe that you ever get to the point where you're fearless. You just learn to do it scared, right? That's the definition of courage. And that's really what I found in my experience, right? And a lot of people feel the same way because how many times like somebody asks you to do something and you're like just like, oh no, I don't want to do it. You ask somebody to go out and speak and they're like, oh, I don't want to do it. a lot of the excuses and things that we give ourselves is because what if we're like so good that you actually are more capable than you think you are, right? And for a lot of people, that can be a very scary thought. And oh man, this has been such a powerful conversation. Oh, do we have something here? What is that? It's like a really long comment. Oh, okay. He's just selling something. Okay. But yeah, this has been an incredible conversation. Next week, we're definitely getting back with guests, and I have probably the next month or so guests booked. And I actually really like it, honestly, when guests come on because not only do I not have to talk as much, but I get to learn more about other people. As a lot of you know, I love listening. I feel that it is the most underrated and underutilized superpower that we have. I always make that was one of the reasons why I was going to so many events was that I always wanted to make sure that I listened twice as much as I speak because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And yeah, this is, interesting. Oh, Russ, you're welcome. Oh, Angelica, good to see you, my friend. Yeah, it's been a it's been a minute. I've been making a lot of, changes, and like I said, be more I would much rather, and I wanna say this again because this is powerful, right? I would much rather offend somebody else than lie to myself, right? If you're doing something that's not serving you, if you're doing something that doesn't align with you, if you're doing something that you really don't want to do, unless it's something that you don't want to do, but it's required for the goal or something that you want to achieve, s- do something different, right? Like we tend to overcomplicate things so much. And I really do believe that, and that's one of the things that I found, honestly. Believe it or not, I have learned so much about LinkedIn from the people that I talk to who know a little bit about it versus the people who know pretty much nothing about it. I mean, the profile in and of itself is probably like a 1 to 2 hour show that I could just go like really, really in depth and how there's like so many intricacies that people miss. But it's been an incredible journey here. I mean, I love LinkedIn. I always joke with people that there's two things that you won't ever hear me complain about, and that's being American and LinkedIn. You know, I I just see so many people like complaining about when everything goes wrong, and nobody talks about like how incredible this platform is. I mean, let's really be honest and look at what we don't have to deal with here that you have to deal with on pretty much every other platform. You don't have to deal with the crazy um DMs from like foreign people about like hooking up and all these type of things. You don't have to deal with that on LinkedIn. You don't have to deal with people like spam commenting, oh, pay X to gain followers or all these type of things. Most people will tell you what they do and where they're from. So you don't have to send people a DM just to figure out, okay, well, can I even help you? Right. There's so many things about this platform. And then let's talk about the quality of people. I mean, I don't even know where to start in my network. Like so many incredible friends, like so many people today that were here. Damien, Michelle, Donna, who else was here? Mary, Amber, Joshua, Corinne, Lee, Brian, Nancy, Nicole, so many people. I mean, uh, we really need to focus on the things that are going right instead of always talking about things that are going wrong. It's what I always talk about. For me, gratitude is it's so much more than a word. It's a lifestyle, it's a state of being, it's something that I live every single day, like every aspect of my life. And yeah, it's been an incredible show. I love the conversation, and we will definitely do it all again next week, right? I'm curious to see who the how everyone thinks about the guest. And she's one of my good friends, and she has an incredible story. And I don't want to spoil too much, but she's coming to LinkedIn, right? Like Deion Sanders says, we're coming, or I'm coming, I'm here, whatever it is, right? And I know a lot of the people in the audience are creators, right? Just be like the quote that I have on the banner every single episode, right? Be more afraid of being nothing than being something. And with that, I will wish everyone an incredible uh, Wednesday evening or afternoon, morning, wherever you are tuning in. And yeah, we'll see you next week for Impossible Equals Impossible. And have a great night.